Okay, so what you're going to need over the next couple of weeks is the ability to put together a set of elevations and one section for your term project. When you create those elevations and section, you're going to be basing them on your completed floor plans and roof plan. So whether you're ready to start the elevations yet or not, or the section yet or not, you still need to put time into those floor plans and get them ready. Okay, it's really, really hard to do this project if you leave everything until the last minute, right? It's not a tough term project, right? But it does take time. It's hard to do quickly. Okay, so slow and steady, doing a little bit of work every week is really, really the best way to go. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my, actually, no, I'm going to leave it. Don't worry about it. Should not bother anybody. Okay, so the commands that we need to learn today in order to help you with these elevations and section are going to be divide and measure. Okay, when we use divide and measure, they don't actually break up an object, but what they do is they place a series of points to act as markers. Okay, so those points that we place, okay, it's called a point. Okay, that's the alias for it. If you type in PO and you hit enter, you can select any spot on your screen with your mouse and click, and you will place this one single point. Okay, so the command is point, but this can also be referred to as a node. Okay, so both terms are correct, point or node. Okay, but the alias in the command to use this object is point. Okay, the reason why I bring that up is because if you look at your object snaps, and here's our object snaps, there isn't actually a point object snap. What we do have instead is this node. Okay, so point and node are essentially the same thing for us and all of our purposes. Okay, so if you want to snap to this point, you need to make sure that this node option is active. Now, when we use our line work or other objects, right, we can snap to that point in space, to that node. Okay, so that don't forget about that, because that will come in very handy later on. Okay. The other thing we have to address with our points is that by default, they're actually not that easy to see, right? They're just a single coordinate in space. It's an X and a Y position and nothing else. So if we take our points and we place them on top of objects, unless you know it's there, it can be very, very hard to visually distinguish, right? The only way I would know there's a point here is if I use a crossing selection, I'm going to see all three grips. That point is still hidden. If I use a window selection, this is the only way I'm actually going to be able to find it properly. Okay, so visually on our drawing, okay, what you want to do in your model space is we're going to use this command DDP type, okay, digital display of point type. Okay? And when you type that in, DDP type, right? I always remember it, Diamond Dallas Page type. Okay, you will pull up a menu. Okay, and from this menu, you can select how you want your point to display itself visually in your model space. Okay, it's still only an X and a Y position, but the graphic will be changed so that you can see it more easily. So my preference is the X. I find that this does a good job, but depending on what you prefer, you could choose from any one of these. Okay, I don't recommend the blank one. I would probably also recommend to stay away from any symbol that could be misinterpreted as line work, right? The round one could be a column. The square one almost looks like a column. This single line could be lost over top of line work, and the plus sign could be lost on the corner of a wall. So there's some that are better than others, in my opinion, right? But you choose what you feel works best. I like the X. And okay, so they can print. It depends on what layer they're on, right? But they are an actual object in the screen. Okay. If you don't want them to print, then you should be using something like a notes layer, or as in our case for our class, we're only using them for reference. So once we're done with them, a lot of the time we're just going to delete them and get rid of them, right? They're only a temporary object, right? We usually use them to divide up a specific object, and then we draw the line work that we need and we delete those points. Okay, so you can create a specific layer that won't plot, or you can just delete them afterwards, such as I do. Okay, so down below you have point size. It can be relative to the screen, or it can be an absolute unit. So an absolute unit is represented by real world dimensions. Okay, so if we're working in inches, this point would be 5 inches across. Okay, if you set it relative, then it will just be a percentage. Okay, usually I would set this down to 4, just to have it a little bit smaller than what they recommend, because I feel like it takes up too much space. Okay, so when it's set relative to screen, okay, there's our points that have been updated. We can now very definitely see where this point is over top of our line work. The nice thing about them being based on a percentage is that if we zoom out, right, you can see that every so often they will regenerate, right, and they get bigger because they're always trying to match that percentage ratio. The one trouble with that is that when we zoom back in, sometimes these points can be a little bit too big. So if we were to create a number of points, right, and we zoomed out to look at the site, right, when we zoom back in, sometimes you can be a little bit out of control. So to deal with this, what we use is the command regen. Okay, it stands for regenerate. And so I'm going to copy this down below. Keep missing the key. I have cold fingers. It's cold in my house. Okay, so regenerate. Okay, the command is regen, and the alias is RE. Okay, so if we ever want to have AutoCAD regenerate the screen or redraw the shapes, you can type in RE and hit enter, and it will update the screen. Okay? Those points, when they're all over the place, can be a little bit annoying. So if you are working with them, there's probably a pretty good chance that you'll have to regenerate your screen once in a while. And it's just to help control what's happening visually on screen so that you can draft and observe your information a little bit more clearly. Okay, so we'll use regenerate a little bit. Okay, if you don't like having to regenerate, you could set this to be an absolute unit, and then these points, no matter how far out or how far in you go, they will always be that constant size. It all depends on what you want to deal with and what you think works best for you. Okay. So in our class, we use measure, we use divide. Okay, they both place points along objects. Measurement places a point at a specific interval. Okay, so if I was to use measure on our line work here, okay, select my line work, and say, I want to place a point every 32 units. Okay, so remember that we do have a midpoint. So if I clicked on the left-hand side of the midpoint, starting at the bottom here, AutoCAD is going to count every 32 units, and it will place a point. Okay, so the trouble with measure is that sometimes we end up with a little bit left over. Okay, but it still has its place and purpose. Okay, you can use measure for arcs, you can use measure for lines, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. Okay, the other option we have here is divide. In some cases where we need objects to be exactly equal, divide will be the better option. So if you're trying to place pickets on a banister at equal intervals, divide will probably work best. If you want to create equal sized stairs, right, the run and rise of a step, then divide will also be your best option for that. Okay, so when we use divide, it also places points, but instead of specifying intervals, we're telling AutoCAD how many equal segments we want. Okay, all these segments will be exactly equal. So I can say I want 7 equal segments. Okay, then AutoCAD will place a point along this object to indicate where those 7 equal segments occur. Okay, so it works with line work, works also with arcs and other shapes. Okay, you can use divide to create these exactly equal segments. Okay, we're going to come back to divide and measure in a few minutes. Okay, when we go through our section and look at how we can use divide to help us with that. Okay, before we get to our section, we also need to think a little bit about how we're going to coordinate between our floor plans and those elevations and sections. So when you're ready to create your elevations, you need to make sure that you have your floor plan accurate and complete. Okay, one of the worst things that can happen is when you start drawing your elevations or you start drawing your sections and you find out that either some of the information is wrong or that you actually haven't drawn it all yet, right? Because sometimes when we haven't completed the floor plan, that means that we haven't discovered all of the issues yet. So you want to make sure that before you do your elevation, before you do your section, you have before you do your elevations or sections, you have your floor plan accurate and complete, okay? So in order to help us create these elevations, okay, we'll do a simple elevation of the front here. We can do the side too if we want to, okay? We're going to use the commands ray and construction line. Okay, both of these commands can be used to pull reference down from the floor plan. We'll go through that setup. So ray, okay, when you start the command, it asks you to specify a start point, and then it asks you to specify the through point. So the through point is the trajectory. It's the direction the ray is going to go, right? So wherever you move your mouse, this is where the ray will shoot. And it's going to shoot off into the distance. So if I put my orthographic mode on, I can control this ray and I can shoot it straight down or straight to the right, left, or up. Okay, and choose which axis I want it to move on. So if I point straight down and click, AutoCAD has created an array now. So the array command keeps on going. If I want to create a new one, I need to hit enter to stop the command, and I can hit enter again to start the command. And I can go over and create my next ray. So these rays, they have a start point, they have a grip, which represents the through point, the direction, but they have no end point. They go on forever, okay, just like a ray of light. Okay, it goes on forever. So most of the time we're using these for reference. Yeah, we're going to draw over top of them, or we're going to trim them up and use them once they intersect other line work. Okay, but ray is one option that we can use for elevations and sections. The other option is construction line, XL. XL is very similar in that you pick a base point and then you specify which direction you want it to go. The difference is that instead of going one way, it goes two ways. Okay. The one thing though that I do like about construction line is that when you start the command, if you look at the bottom in the command line, it lets you align whether you want this construction line to be horizontal or vertical. Okay, so if I choose vertical, I now have an object where I can continually place these construction lines without starting and stopping the command. So if you have larger elevations or a longer segment of building that you need to do an elevation for, sometimes this can save you a little bit of time and keep you from banging on your keyboard constantly, right? When you start and stop and stop and start those ray commands. Okay, so my preference is construction line. And to be honest, I didn't use it for a very long time until someone else showed it to me. Okay, so either one works. Whichever works best for you is the way that you should go. Okay, so how do we do our elevation? When you start your elevation, you need to have certain pieces of information. So hang on one second, I'm going to open something here. Okay, so one document that you should have with you is going to be your term project. Okay, you need to have all this information for the term project. And more specifically, we are very, very interested in the different heights of where objects occur. So if we look at the front elevation, we can see that we have our ground floor at 0 foot 0. Our second floor, right, the top of floor is at 9 foot 11. And the underside of the roof joist is at 17 foot 11 3/4. Right? You're going to need that information. Okay, we look at the section that was provided to you. Okay, you have information here as well. And we can also see that at the front steps, okay, the ground, right, the sidewalk here is 2 feet below the finished first floor. So this is all stuff that we're going to need to make note of and make sure that we know these distances when we get into our elevations. Okay, so to do a quick one here, okay, so the first step would be that we never work on the original. We want to keep our finished floor plans intact. We don't want to be editing and drawing over top of them in case we make a mistake or in case we delete something that we shouldn't. So when you're ready to do your elevation, we're going to take our floor plan and using the copy command, we're going to move it off to the side. And you can give yourself lots of distance, right? We don't want to have a cluttered workspace. So you can space things out a little bit. So if we're drawing the front elevation, we could leave it aligned just the way it is because we're going to be drawing our elevation straight down. If you were going to do the side elevation, we would copy this again and we would use a command like rotate, right? This isn't our original. We have our original in a nice safe spot. So we can manipulate these floor plans so that we can draw those elevations and sections more easily. Okay, but for this example, we're only going to do the front here. So using our elevation layers, we can start to mark out our different heights. Okay, so we have our elevation bold. We're going to put down our ground floor plane. Okay, this is where the first floor is. I'm going to pretend that each of these steps is 8 inches. So we have 1, 2, 3. So our change in elevation from our finished floor to the ground is going to be 2 feet, 24 units. Okay, so we're just making this up for the example here. Okay. And then the underside of our roof, we're going to have a flat roof on top of our fancy home. We're going to say the underside is 8 feet up. Okay, but you could make that whatever you please. Okay, so I have my floor plan copied off to the side, and I've marked out the different elevations that I need underneath. And you'll notice that each one of these lines is more than wide enough, right? It covers a lot of space. They're only there for reference at this point. Okay, so when we draw our elevations, okay, we're pretending that we're standing in front and that we are looking towards the facade. Right, so I'm standing in front, I'm looking towards the building. The objects that we draw first, right, the objects that are going to be the boldest are the ones that are closest to us. So I always work from close to far. If I was to take a line from my current viewpoint and move it up slowly, the objects that will be boldest are the ones that we touch first. So I touch the stair and I touch the roof line. So these objects up front are going to be the bold objects. Okay. Further back, we have our column and we have our wall. Those will be medium. And then the furthest ones, okay, it's actually going to be this doorway. So we have near, we have far, and we have objects in between. All those objects need to go on the appropriate elevation layer. Okay, so I'm going to start with my stairs and my roof line. So using construction line, I'm going to orientate it vertically with letter V. And I'm going to mark the outside extremities of where this roof sits and where these stairs sit. When I go back down, okay, let's get rid of this line. Okay, when I go back down to my different elevations here, we can see where those are in space here. So for my roof, I'm just going to pretend that this is a 1 foot thick roof. Okay, so I have my outside edges here, and I have the thickness of the roof, right? I can trim that off. Okay, I can also trim this, and I can start to mark out where everything sits here. Okay, delete what I don't need. Okay, so there's my roof, and there's my front steps. All right, the one thing I'm missing from my front steps is I don't have the risers being shown. And to be honest, I'm actually going to switch these to my medium layer. So I only want that first step to be bold. I want to try to convey the understanding that these are moving away from me. Okay, so my bold objects are done. I've moved a couple steps over to my medium layer. So I'm going to switch over to medium. Then I'm using different colors to provide visual distinction between each of them in my AutoCAD file. Construction line with vertical alignment. Now I'm going to mark my medium object. So that's my post and the outside of the wall here. The window, I'm actually going to draw on the fine layer, because if you put your window mullions on too bold of a layer, they don't look crisp and they can actually look a little bit messy. So usually any bits of detail I will put onto a fine layer so that it stays nice and sharp when we print. Okay, down below, I'm going to trim up where the roof is. Also going to trim here, here, and here. This line here I need to trim, but I can't right now. So I'm actually just going to pull this back over, because this is actually my ground plane. This, that, delete the things I don't need. There we go. Okay, so we've done our bold objects, we've done our medium objects, and now we're going to do our fine objects. So we switch to our fine layer. construction line with a vertical alignment again. And I'm going to mark my window and my doorway, always being careful to accurately snap to those endpoints and the proper object snaps. Oh, I forgot to switch my layer. I thought I did switch my layer. How bizarre. It's okay. We'll resolve this now. Okay, so my doorway, right? For now, we're making this up. We'll say it's 7 foot. Okay, there's the top of the door, which can be the top of my window as well. And then the bottom of the window, we'll say is 32 units off the ground, off the first floor, right? So we're just marking things out. Use fillet with a radius of 0. And we'll just go through and clean these up. Keep missing. If I fillet this right now, we're going to lose this line. So I actually need to stop and trim this. Okay, make sure we go back and fix our layer assignment. Okay, and we have a basic elevation. So simple elevations don't take a lot of time, but it's good practice. Okay, but don't spend too much time practicing on this demonstration file. The real practice is going to come into your term project. The last thing I would do with any elevation is you have to make sure that you show the ground line scrubbed. Graphically, it looks better, and I've never been taught anything other than that. So the way that we would do this, if you remember with polylines, okay, here's my polyline. If we go to P-edit, we can set a width of 2, and we can give this a heavier line. This is, kind of what we would do working by hand. We would take a soft lead and we would scrub that line so that the ground line looks a little bit more defined. It gives the elevation a little bit of weight, makes it look sturdy. With a polyline, the other way you can get there is if you go to the properties and there's a global width. Okay, you want to make sure you use the global width. If you use the start and end, right, you can actually have a polyline that looks like a little arrow here, right? So you want to be careful that you set the global width to 2. Okay. So this object on the bottom isn't a polyline. So if you want to turn it into one, you can redraw over top, or if you use the P-edit command, AutoCAD will actually ask you, this is not a polyline, but do you want to turn it into one? So you can answer Y for yes. And this is now a polyline. So at this point, you can add width to it, or you can go back to the properties, okay? But when you do your elevations, these ground lines, they should be scrubbed, right? They should have a heavier line weight to them, okay? That's how we would do that. Okay, so you're going to use the ray and construction line commands to pull reference from your floor plans so that you can set up and mark up where these different objects occur. Okay, you can do that for your elevations. You can use that for your section. Okay, the thing that I want to do now is I'd like to open up my term project. And I'd like to take the first floor plan and walk you through the same steps, but applying them to a section now. Okay, so it'll take about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, hopefully 10. And then we can have some lab time afterwards. Okay. Which version of this is ours? I think these are the same. I'm not sure why they're separated. Okay. So let's do this. Let's turn off what we don't need. Okay. So here's our first floor plan and our second floor plan. I'm only interested in the first floor plan for now. So I'm going to make a copy and put it way off to the side here. So I have nice separation. Sometimes with my drawings, if I have master copies, I like to mark where those are so that if I zoom out, I can find them easily. Okay. With this floor plan, I need to do a front elevation, I need to do a side elevation, and I need to do a side section. Okay. If I was going to lay this out for myself, I would make this layout right away and just start to get things coordinated, right? So that everything's kind of set up. I can start to build my file this way. For our purposes today, for what we're practicing, we're really only interested in this side view. So we're going to look at how to create this section and kind of what the process behind that would be. Okay, so if you look at the handout for the term project, it does show you where that section should occur. Okay, basically our section cut goes through the front door here. I think it's lined up with the center of the stairs. Okay, so in AutoCAD, okay, I'm going to take a line. I can track out to the side. I'm going to draw right through the center of the stairs and make sure that I cut through the entire home, because I'm going to need this reference to know where I'm dropping my lines for that section cut. Starting with my bold layer, the next thing that I would do is I'm going to mark out the heights of the first floor, second floor, and underside of roof. I can also mark the bottom of the stairs here if I want to as well. So the first floor would be 0. The second floor is 9'11" above. Actually, I'm totally guessing. I should double check that. Hang on, let's check. I can't remember. Okay, 9'11", looks good. The underside of the roof joist up top, 8 foot and 3/4. Okay, so offset 8 foot and 3/4. Okay, the stairs, okay, is a 2 foot drop to the sidewalk. So we're going to offset 24. Okay, that will be the bottom under the stairs there. Okay, next up, with my bold layer, I'm going to mark all of the objects that we cut through. Okay, so I'm going to use construction line with a vertical alignment. I'm going to go through, I'm going to mark the walls. I'm going to do the walls first, so I'm going to have to figure out these stairs. I'm going to do the walls first. Okay, there's this, we would actually cut through the bulkhead here, so I'm going to mark this as well. And there would be another one here at the front door. Okay, we don't cut through this, but we don't cut through the other walls here. So that's it for our walls. So for the first floor, okay, these are the walls that we are going to trim through. And we're just going to go bit by bit. It's just like floor plans. You can't do it all at once, unfortunately. Okay. From my plans, if I look over on the side, okay, I can read these general notes, and I can see that all the floor joists are 12 inches deep. And all the floor joists are 12 inches deep. So I can offset 12. There's my second story floor joist, and here's my first story floor joist. Okay, clean up our line work again, step by step. Okay. Next up, we need to mark where the stairs begin and end. Okay, if I look up top, what's happening here? We have a little bit of millwork on the side here. I don't really have specific information about this, so I'm going to figure that out later. We have some millwork in the washroom that we cut through. Not going to worry about that as well. And then we have these stairs. So the stairs is a tough part for most people, okay? But it's actually not that bad because you don't need to really figure out too much about the stairs. If you look at the handout, it actually tells you all the distances that you need. So if we look at this, it tells us on the bottom here that the total length of the stairs is 12'6", and there's 15 runs. And the total height is 9'11", and there's 16 rises. So we've already put in the height from floor to floor, which is what we need, but now we need to mark where this run starts and begins. So from the outside wall, the beginning of the stairs is 9'9.5" from the exterior. Okay, 9'9.5". So down below, I'm going to offset 9'9.5" from the exterior wall, and this is the beginning of my stair. The total overall run, okay, is 12'6". Okay, so offset 12'6", and we're going to mark where this run ends. Okay. So the total number of runs is 15. The total number of rises is 16. Okay. So if we use divide, we can select our floor-to-floor height, okay, 9'11", and we can divide this 16 times. Okay, now we have our points marking out where each of these steps occurs going up. Okay, and using the divide command, we know that these are all perfectly equal. Okay, to do the run, we're going to snap from the beginning to the end and draw a line. Okay, there is an extra line on top of the other floor joist here. I move this up a little bit, you can see it a little bit better. And we're going to divide this 15 times. Okay, so now we have equal segments for our rise and our run. And the idea behind having these markers is that we're going to use them to draw one perfect stair. So if I use my line command, I can snap to this node. Okay, there's my node snap. Okay, so there's the first height. I can start the line command and snap to the node up top, pull a line down. Okay, I have my orthographic mode on, so I know things are nice and square. And using this reference, I can now snap, snap, and snap. And underneath this, I now have one perfect stair, right, by using that reference. So the rest of these, I can get rid of this now. Okay, I don't need it anymore. Actually, hang on one second. I'm going to keep this line that marks where these stairs begin. But these other ones I can get rid of, I believe. Okay? I want to keep where the stairs begin here, just for reference. So I'm going to take this one perfect step, and using base points, I'm going to copy it and duplicate it like so. Once I do a few, I can grab those I can get this done a little bit quicker. Oh, perfect. Okay. So there's the start and the end. Okay. So if you want to, we can trim this off here and here. You can clean this up a little bit here. Okay. If we want to add a little bit of depth to the stringer, draw a line, okay, across the nose of those stairs. You can offset them. You know, there's no specifics to this. We're not engineering, so you can just make something up. And then we can trim this up. Okay. So it's not so bad. Okay, so using that divide command and using the dimensions that are provided to you, you can go through and you can start to lay this out step by step by step. Okay, it takes a little bit of practice, but it's not too bad, right? And as long as you're careful to read the general notes and make sure that these heights and widths are being respected, as long as we're careful to make sure that we go through the drawings that are provided and that we're being accurate, okay, we can actually go and set this up. Okay, now it'll take a little bit of effort, right? And it won't be super fast. It does take time, so you just have to be careful and take your time and work away at it slowly. Right, like I said, it's not a hard project, but it does take a little bit of time. Okay, and once you get everything laid out, right, then you can have a simple section put together. Okay, so that's not the finished one, but that's kind of what we're aiming for. Okay.